Morning sunlight poured through the dusty windows of Eleanor's café, painting golden lines across old coffee cups and chrome stools. The place smelled of fried eggs, diesel, and routine, the kind of peace small towns wear like a second skin. In the back booth sat 8 members of the Steel Saints Motorcycle Club, laughing over pancakes. Among them, Jack Reaper Callen, a man whose silence carried the weight of 10 years of guilt. On his wrist, a small silver watch had long stopped ticking. So had he. The bell above the door suddenly exploded open. A little girl, barefoot, bleeding, her red dress torn, stumbled inside, gasping through tears. "Please! He's hurting my mama!" Every sound in the cafe died. Forks froze mid-air. The child's words cut through the room like a blade, turning fear into stillness. Jack looked at her, wide eyes, trembling hands, and something inside him cracked. She looked just like his daughter. He stood up slowly, the chair legs screeching against tile. For the first time in years, his heart remembered how to beat. "Where is she?" he asked. The girl pointed towards the parking lot, sobbing, and as the sunlight flickered off his steel badge keychain, Jack whispered to himself, "Not again?" Then he ran. Jack pushed through the door before anyone else moved. Outside, sunlight hit the cracked asphalt, and the sound of shouting tore through the still air. Across the parking lot, Riley Vega was on the ground, her face bruised, her arms raised to shield herself from the man towering above her. Travis Holt, her ex-husband, once a police officer, now just a drunk with rage in his veins. "Stay out of this!" Travis barked, lifting his arm again. Jack didn't answer. He crossed the distance in 5 long strides, grabbed the man's wrist mid-swing, and twisted. A clean hold. Controlled, not brutal. Travis stumbled, cursed, then hit the ground with a thud. One of the bikers had already pulled out his phone, recording everything. Another was calling 911. Riley crawled backward, gasping. Luna ran to her mother, crying. Jack knelt beside them, his voice steady but soft. "You're safe now, we've got you." For a moment, all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. That same rhythm he hadn't heard since the night he'd lost his family. In the distance, sirens began to rise, slow then louder, the sound of help finally arriving, and a man finally doing the right thing. Blue and red lights washed over the parking lot. Paramedics lifted Riley onto a stretcher, her breathing shaky but steady. Little Luna refused to let go of her mother's hand. A deputy led Travis to a patrol car, his face twisted with anger. Even in cuffs, he glared at Jack. "You think this is over? She's mine." Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. He'd learned that some battles weren't won by fists, but by patience and proof. Later, inside the cafe, Sheriff Ray Miller, an old friend of Jack's, finished taking statements. He shook his head. "She's lucky you were here, Jack. But unless she files charges, that man walks free by morning." Jack looked toward the ambulance pulling away, sirens fading into the distance. "Then I'll make sure she's not alone when she does." But hours later, when he visited the hospital, Riley refused to sign the report. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He always finds me. You don't know what he's capable of." Jack stood silent, watching fear hold her tighter than any bruise. And for the first time that day, he felt that old ache return. The helplessness of a man who'd once arrived too late. He looked down at his watch. Still broken, still waiting. 2 nights later, the cafe was quiet again. But peace has a cruel way of feeling borrowed. Jack sat alone in his garage, the only light a single bulb swinging above his bike. He was polishing the same chrome that had already shined hours ago. Because when you can't fix your heart, you fix what you can touch. The door creaked open. Sheriff Ray Miller stepped inside, holding a thin folder. "I ran the file you asked for, about Travis Holt." Jack wiped his hands, pretending calm. Ray placed the folder on the workbench. Inside, a termination report from the police department, an incident record, a date circled in red. 10 years ago, the night Jack's wife and daughter were killed in a home invasion. Ray's voice was careful. "He was your partner that night, Jack. He never answered the dispatch call, left his post to go drinking." Jack stared at the page until the words blurred. The air felt too heavy to breathe. "So while my family was dying, he was at a bar." Ray nodded, guilt in his eyes. "I should have told you sooner. I didn't know he was the same man until now." Jack didn't answer. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the broken watch, the one his daughter had given him on her last birthday. The second hand had stopped at 9:42 p.m., the exact time of the break-in. "He took everything from me once," Jack whispered, voice trembling. "And now, he's doing it again." Night fell hard on the edge of town. Inside a small apartment above a closed flower shop, Riley Vega sat by the window, the lights off, her hands wrapped around a mug she never drank from. Luna had finally fallen asleep, one arm over her stuffed rabbit, her small chest rising in uneven breaths. Every sound outside felt like a threat: a car door, a barking dog, the hum of a distant engine. Then, headlights flashed across the wall. Riley froze. She crawled to the window, barely breathing. Down on the street, a black pickup idled at the corner. Her stomach twisted. She knew that truck. "Travis!" She turned off the lamp, clutching Luna's hand. The truck lingered, then slowly rolled away. Across town, Jack couldn't sleep either. He stood in front of his bulletin board. Newspaper clippings, old case files, a photo of his wife and daughter smiling beside that same broken watch. He picked up his phone. "Ray, it's me. He's circling her again." "We can't put a unit there every night," Ray sighed. "Budget cuts, you know how it is." Jack's jaw tightened. "Then I'll handle the nights." The next evening, engines rumbled outside Riley's building, but not from danger. Jack and a few bikers stood by their bikes, leather vests glinting in the orange streetlight. They weren't vigilantes. They'd registered with the police under a new program called Safe Watch, volunteers who patrolled neighborhoods for domestic violence protection. They didn't talk much that night. They just stood there, silent, watchful, and steady, like walls built from steel and remorse. And for the first time in weeks, Riley slept through the night. Rain fell in thin silver lines across the streetlights. At 2:14 a.m., Jack's phone buzzed. "He's back," Ray's voice came through the static. "Black pickup spotted near Riley's block." Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket, the broken watch still on his wrist, and gunned the engine. Within minutes, the low thunder of motorcycles echoed through the sleeping town. They found the truck 2 blocks away, lights off, engine cold. A figure moved in the shadows, carrying a gas can and a crowbar. Travis Holt. Jack signaled the others to surround the alley, headlights flaring like silent sentinels. Rain hissed on asphalt as Jack stepped forward alone. "Travis!" The man froze, shoulders tense, drenched in light. "You can't protect her forever," he spat. "When you're gone, I'll finish what I started." Jack's voice stayed low, steady. "You already finished it the night you walked away from your duty. You left a family to die, and that family was mine." Travis blinked, realization flickering in his eyes. Jack took a step closer, calm but unflinching. 10 years ago, I came too late. Not tonight." Behind him, sirens began to rise. Ray's patrol car slid into the alley, red and blue lights cutting through the rain. Jack raised his voice. "You're under arrest for attempted arson, unlawful possession, and violation of a protection order. Drop it." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Travis's grip loosened. The crowbar hit the pavement. He looked around. 8 bikers, 4 officers, nowhere left to run. "This isn't over," he hissed. Jack met his eyes. "Yes, it is." Ray cuffed him as thunder rolled overhead. Jack exhaled, finally, as if breathing for the first time in years. Rain slid down his face, but for once it wasn't grief. It was release. He looked at his watch. The second hand twitched, and for the first time in a decade, time began to move again. Morning broke soft and colorless after the rain. The world looked washed clean, though the people inside it were still learning how to breathe again. Riley sat on a hospital bed, sunlight spilling through the blinds in thin stripes across her face. Luna slept beside her, curled like a kitten, safe for the first time in months. Jack stood by the doorway, hat in hand. For once, there was nothing left to chase. No sirens, no threats, only silence that demanded honesty. Riley opened her eyes. "He's really gone?" Jack nodded. "For good. 10 years in federal, no early release." She exhaled, shaking as relief and exhaustion collided. "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't owe me anything," Jack said. "Just heal the right way. Don't let what he did decide who you are." She smiled faintly. "And what about you? When do you start healing?" Jack looked at the small girl asleep beside her mother. "Maybe I already have." Weeks passed. Riley attended therapy through a non-profit the bikers supported. Luna started school again, drawing suns and motorcycles instead of nightmares. One evening, they met Jack at the café. Luna climbed off her chair, holding a piece of paper with both hands. A new drawing. A man on a motorcycle, 2 figures riding behind him, the road stretching into sunrise. Above it, in uneven letters, "This time you came in time." Jack took it carefully, eyes stinging. "This one's going on my wall." He looked at the broken watch on his wrist. And for once, he didn't mind that it no longer told the time. Because everything that mattered was finally on time. A year later, the road leading to Eleanor's café shimmered under summer light. Engines hummed in the distance, not the roar of chaos, but a rhythm of unity. Hundreds of bikers rolled in, chrome glinting like waves of armor. They weren't here for a ride. They were here for a cause. The first annual Roads for Her charity run, raising funds for shelters and survivors of domestic violence. Riley stood on the cafe's small patio, a microphone trembling in her hands. Jack watched from below, his leather vest faded, his heart not so heavy anymore. "A year ago," Riley began, "my daughter ran into this diner crying for help. Strangers stood up, and they didn't just save us. They gave us back our lives." Applause rippled through the crowd, quiet but powerful. She turned toward Jack. "People see leather and think danger. But that day, leather meant safety. It meant family." Luna stepped forward, holding a framed painting. The same drawing from months ago, now colored in detail and framed with care. It showed 8 bikers forming a circle around a woman and child beneath a rising sun. At the bottom, the words, "Sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. It rides a Harley." The crowd rose to their feet. Jack knelt as Luna handed him the frame. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled. "No, kid. Thank you. You reminded me that showing up is enough." As the engine started again, hundreds of bikes rolled out together, a thunderous heartbeat echoing down the open road. Jack glanced at his watch. The hands ticked forward once more, and somewhere between the noise and the wind, he heard a small voice, the same one that had shattered his silence a year ago. "Please, help." Only this time, it wasn't a cry, it was a memory, a promise kept. Justice had arrived, on time.